everyone. Welcome back to Data Movers, the Digital Future, Data Movers 2.0. I'm Candace Ipos with JSA, and I am joined again by Maxie Reynolds, CEO and founder of Subsea Cloud. So, hey, Maxie, we have to continue our tradition, and let me know something interesting that you've read lately.
Okay, I think you're gonna like this because I was like swatting up for this session today. So I went back and like skim read Andy Grove's High Output Management, and there was something really interesting there which I parrot and sometimes use as my own when I speak at like conferences. And it's about training, and the stats are like really interesting on it. So training is like one of the highest leverage activities that anybody like a manager can perform. So if you think about it in numbers, if it takes 3 hours of preparation for each hour of course time, and let's say that's then 12 hours work for a 4 hour course, then and you have 10 students in your class, those 10 students will work about 20,000 hours for you next year. And if your training effort results in just a 1% improvement in their performance, you'll gain the equivalent of 200 hours of work as the result of that like initial 12-hour expenditure. So it's really interesting. I like when things are put into like a numerical format rather than like the philosophical soft way to say things.
Yeah. That's incredible. That gives some kind of meat behind the, any managers who might be finding it really difficult to find the time to
Yeah.
train, that sort of thing. It's like, well,
Yeah.
it doesn't feel like it in the moment, but it will
No,
actually
it does
pay
not. It
dividends.
does
So we are diving into the very important conversation around employee retention and talent retention in the digital infrastructure industry today. So we have an expert panel for you. I'm really excited about it. So we know that there's a few facts converging to create this kind of invisible revolving door that everybody can feel within the industry, from operator to operator, particularly in the data center space, but certainly across the broader industry as well. So the skyrocketing growth in the industry, first of all, puts a massive strain on the humans who are keeping the internet online and keeping data flowing and all of that good stuff. And then also, it's such an insular, young sector, relatively young sector. So that kind of means that we're staying very close to our competitors and thus kind of poaching. And so the question is, how do we prevent burnout and keep employees motivated to do the best work of their career where they currently are?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I bet if you solved it for this industry, you could somewhat blanket solve it for a lot of others. Like there will be some crossover between them. So I think it is an important question. Um, I have some stats. I like stats probably too much. I think it's a problem. I think it affects my life adversely. But I do I do have some stats to like, set the stage here. So according to the Uptime Institute's 2023 data center staffing survey, 55% of data center operators are having difficulty retaining staff, with 40% of those operators reporting that staff are being hired away by competitors, which is similar to your outset question here. And the survey also found that there's like a 20% point increase in staff being hired away as compared to a different like survey that was conducted just earlier that year. So that's one. And two is the data center staffing survey states, and I quote, although university hires account for the third highest source of recruits, which is about 41%, the relatively short tenure of this group compared with older employees signals a need for data center organizations to incentivize longer term retention of this group, or else recruit from an alternative source, which I think was quite interesting. And I have a third one. Are we ready for that? Human error, even if we're not, human error contributes to roughly 2/3 or to 4/5 of all data center outages, which I'm constantly seeing on my like sales to big companies. And that's reported by IT Pro, based on uptime data. So one factor could be fatigue caused by the long shift data center professionals are working, which is worsened by maybe a lack of skilled staff. I'm sure there's a lot of variables, but we can sort of guess at them. I'm sure we can handle some of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are really interesting stats. Of course, we're pulling quite a bit from Uptime, so shout out to those folks who
Yeah.
do
Yes, thank you.
surveys
Yeah.
every year and really get into the talent shortages and retention
Yeah.
issues as well.
Yeah.
So we have a 3-person expert panel to dive into this topic today. So first of all, I'm going to introduce none other than Simon Allen. You may already know him. He has a lot of titles and a lot of background in the industry. So I'm going to try to sum this up in one sentence. Current senior advisor and industry speaker, former executive director of Infrastructure Masons, and founder of the UK Data Center Interest Group. So Simon, as a way of introduction, thank you for being here. Could you tell our audience a little bit about what brought you into the industry?
Sure. Well, first off, thanks very much, Candace and Maxi, for inviting me on. It's great to be here, and this is such an important topic. Blimey, those stats, Maxi, they're not surprising, but still shocking. Well, as you can probably gather just by looking at me, I've been around quite a long time. You know, I was thinking just before, the first time I met you, Maxi, I think was DCD North Virginia in 2022. No, 21, I think. And the first time I met you, Candace,
21.
was DCD London in 22.
That's right.
I was at the first ever DCD in 2002. Can you believe that? The first ever. It was in London an age ago. I was already in the DC industry. I was working on remote management of IT assets. So as these data centers were being built, the first purpose-built data center in Europe was Telehouse in 1987, but they really started taking off in the late 90s, and all this IT kit was going pushed into these remote buildings. And I worked for a company that had a solution that could access this IT remotely. So sysadmin guys didn't have to leave the desk. They could access their IT in any data center all the time. And I spent most of my career in data center infrastructure management, monitoring, DSIM, as it became to be known. As you say, I went on from 2018 to 2022. I was with the iMasons. Still very proud of what we achieved there. But for the last 2 years, I've had the privilege of being able to spend my time with nice people doing cool things. I spent a lot of time with Dean Nelson. Dean at Cato Digital is building the world's most sustainable bare metal platform, which is super cool. And more relevant to this discussion, I've also been a senior advisor to Foresight, who I think you know, Candace. I saw you interviewing the co-founder, Dr. Atif Ansar, in North Virginia.
That's right.
Last month. Now, Foresight use AI to help build data centers faster. And I've gained a lot of insight into the data center construction supply chain. We're all talking about this huge increase in demand for data centers, which is putting massive pressure on people in the supply chain. Did you know, talking about stats, Maxine, you might like this one, the average time overrun for a data center build is 34%. 34%. So a 24-month construction project will end up taking 32 months. Now, just think about the agony that causes. There's SLA penalties, the delays push back the revenue the operator can earn because it's not open and can't generate revenue for an additional 8 months. So all the cash flow projections are up the wall. It means construction teams can't start the next project because they're not finished the last project yet. And it just causes absolute stress and agony. And this is causing burnout and really high staff turnover rates. Anyway, I started looking at a holistic data center construction supply chain solution. And whilst tools like Foresight can really help with transparency and coordination, they can't really address the human aspect. If the AI can say you've got a problem here, you've been a little too optimistic there, whatever the issue is, if there's no people around, or if the people aren't trained or aren't familiar with the project, they're just trying to catch up, they just started, they can't help. They can't fix the problem. So I've been doing a bit of research, and I've found 2 excellent experts on retention and talent. And I'm delighted they're going to be with us on this podcast right now.
Yes, so excited. I love that. Thank you so much, Simon. We will introduce those very experts next. So thank you for that great intro. And one last question for you before we jump over to Mark. So what one word comes to mind for you, Simon, when you think about talent retention in our industry?
Oh, the one word is, I guess it's got to be agony. I heard a senior COO use that word quite recently in terms of the stress being caused on people in the industry. Agony.
All right, we'll dive into that more soon. Okay, over to Mark and Maxie.
Yes. So next up for us, we have Mark Schofield, founder and managing director of MindAlpha, a company helping organizations deliver sustainable performance gains with behavioral science-driven people analytics. Mark, what brought you into the digital infrastructure industry?
Hi, Maxie. Well, thanks for having me on the podcast. I share your obsession with statistics, so hopefully we'll get into a few more of those going forwards.
Yeah.
I've been involved with sort of behavioral science and analyzing, mapping behavioral patterns in organizations for a number of years. But my involvement with data centers really began about 5 years ago, with a conversation with the CEO of a UK data center company. And he had become immensely frustrated with the sort of queue of consultants outside his door, sort of banging on the door, wanting to charge him a lot of money to tell him how brilliant the culture in his organization was and how high performing they were, et cetera, et cetera. And he came to me with put a challenge in front of me, and he said, listen, I've got a problem here. We have a saying, it's even a mantra for their company, which is, what has got us where we are today will not necessarily take us where we need to go. So I don't need people coming in and telling me what we do well. I need somebody who can come in, look at my organization and tell us where we need to improve. What are the things that we need to do to stay ahead of the game? What, more importantly, are the kind of behavioral patterns that we should be looking out for that predict the direction of travel? So how do I know if I need to put my foot on the accelerator, who's going to thrive and who's going to struggle? If we've got a problem, if we have a crisis situation and I have to hit the brake hard, who's going to struggle? Who's going to suffer? Who's going to show resilience? Who's going to be able to step up? And what do I do about that? And so we went from there. We set about building a diagnostic tool to look at performance, a predictive model, if you like, of sort of behavioral patterns and performance in complex organizations.
Nice. So my ability to free associate is unmatched, and I don't know if I'm proud of that or not, but here we go. So there's an analogy that I kind of was thinking of as you were talking, which was, I think it was in World War II, planes were coming back, sometimes with the pilots and sometimes without, and we were looking at them, the engineers were looking at them and saying, well, here's like where the bullets or whatever weaponry target them, like, let's make that stronger. And one engineer said, no, like, let's make the parts stronger that are failing, not the parts stronger that are actually making it back. And I think it's really hard to get to first principles sometimes. We're very intuitive species, and so, but sometimes it leads us the wrong way. So I really think the way you're doing that is...
That analogy is absolutely spot on. Yeah, people were focusing on those planes, looking at where the bullet holes were, but those were actually the most resilient part of the planes. That's why those planes were known, because it didn't matter.
Exactly.
It was the ones that have been shot down that didn't come back, they weren't able to analyze. So it's exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to spot those hidden patterns, those imbalances very often, more than levels. You know, a lot of people look at behavior and they say, well, you know, this goes up, that comes down. You know, we look at the balances between them, which is where the really interesting stuff is hidden.
Interesting. And then, okay, so if you had one word that comes to mind when you think about talent retention in our industry, then what would it be?
The one word is motivation. If I could just qualify that, though, not as an outcome. It's not that we're trying to sort of build some concept of higher motivation. It's using motivation as a lens on behavioral patterns in organization to understand what's really going on. Because our motivation goes up and down. We can be positively motivated towards a good behavior. We can be motivated towards a poor or an erroneous behavior, or we can be, low motivation towards the things we need to do. So mapping motivation for me is the future of understanding people in data centers.
Yeah. Interesting work, Candice.
I love that.
Next
We're getting
panelist.
great words. Okay, so Marian Telmacov, welcome to Data Movers. So Marian is co-founder and CEO of Dynamis Group, which is a global leadership and talent advisory, and also co-founder of Leaders Who Care Community and Podcast. So Marian, same question for you. You know the drill now. What brought you into the digital infrastructure industry?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me, and great to be here, Candice and Maxi. Really wonderful. We after being probably in the space of leadership and talent advisory for more than 18 years and completing projects in close to 50 countries, we've identified certain patterns that go across. And when we had the privilege of CEOs or organizations or multi-billion businesses and different ownership structures. And we have seen that some of the most successful organizations the most successful sustainable growth organizations have great teams. And we always wanted to find out, how can we build a great team and how can we retain it? And we start looking at patterns, and it's interesting because you see it in different cultures, in different countries, and we see some common traits. And the traits were actually those leaders who were able to not only deliver the results, but the ones who actually cared about the impact. What is this is gonna do? And the ones who really taken care of their team members, the ones who created conditions for people to thrive. So what brought us to the industry, and Simon earlier mentioned agony, and was the pain point. A lot of people, unfortunately, were suffering because of the either lack of expertise or they were not having the support needed. And typically that starts with the leadership, right? So our focus is how can we take care of the leaders and take care of the shareholders. And often we do that through looking at what is the shareholders and leaders' vision and what is the individual or leader's career vision. They too need to match. If they don't, then it's a problem. And that's why we're here, because we're on a mission to help more people thrive at work. And we brought to, when we saw the problem in the digital infrastructure, and about 3 years ago, we saw a lot of best practices as we worked in many different industries where we could help out and bring. And mainly through referral, we came into the industry and by the pain points that we're deeply passionate about to solve.
Excellent. Great. Very important work, especially right now with such a fast growing industry. So what is your one word that comes to mind when you think about talent retention in this industry?
Care. If you just take care of your team, they'll take care of your clients, they'll take care of your own on-time delivery. So really, as leaders, you just need to set up your talent, your employees for success. Do everything you can to take care of them. And I've seen leaders who care, and if that evidently with big corporate organizations, for example, they deliver 20+%, 25% profit margins versus the less than 10. So care is not a weakness. That's my actually message to all the leaders out there. Take care of your team and they'll take care of everything else.
Yeah. As a team member, I love that message.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so shall we bring the gang back together? There we go. Okay, so I think maybe I'm going to start with a very pointed question, and I'm going to shoot at you, Simon.
Okay.
So let's go. So, okay, why is retention important beyond the obvious benefits, beyond streamlining operations and reducing costs and things like that? Where else is it important and why?
Okay, I'll just share a quick story.
Yeah.
I was at DC Deal, North Virginia, last month, I think it was. It's certainly really the last few weeks. And I met somebody who told me that they had 4 senior people hand a notice in the previous month. And the person telling me was considering resigning themselves. Now, that is pretty shocking. You can just imagine the chaos that's going to cause internally, not just trying to find them, especially in a relatively short time scale. It's just going to cause so much pain. Now, in terms of solutions, I'm going to defer to Mark, if you don't mind, because he is without doubt, in my opinion, the world leader on this. So over to you, Mark, if you don't mind.
Well, I mean, just picking up on this question, why does retention matter? It goes a long way beyond just the sort of streamlining the business efficiency. And
where does it go?
It becomes, if you're not careful, if turnover, high turnover rates, lack of retention, high attrition rates are left untouched, then they start to feed on themselves and they become detrimental to performance. And we've seen this in plenty of other fast growth industries where you get an early stage upswing because the industry is growing, because everything's great, everyone's making money, everyone's hiring, there's a supply demand imbalance, and so you get high turnover. But what happens as it matures is that those people involved in that turnover start to see real challenges to how they feel, to their well-being, to their motivation. You get hired out of one company into the next. You move into a bigger job on more money, and you go in there and you look at the job and you're all of a sudden not as embedded into the sort of support environment or framework of the organization as you had been in your previous role. You lack the contextual awareness that you develop with 3, 4, 5 years in a role. And suddenly, however good you are at your job, you feel out of depth. You start syndrome kicking in. And when that happens, the stress response kicks in. And as that happens, you start to see people becoming risk averse. You start to see people struggling with anxiety and even burnout. So performance eventually drops. So it feels like an early stage upswing driven by demand. But actually, this is something that can undermine performance across the industry if it's not tackled.
Okay, but let me ask you just a follow-up question. I'll try to be succinct, and we both will. Have you heard of the Peter principle, where basically within an organization, most people are promoted to incompetency because you get really good at a job and that then beget a promotion? Isn't that a similar path, but now you're just in it in the same organization?
No, it's a different path, because with the Peter principle, you're promoted to the point at which you've outrun the level of your ability, your competence.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're changing roles, you're moving to another organization, some of the reasons that you feel unable to perform at that level are due to just not having that knowledge, that contextual awareness, that knowledge of the systems in that organization. It's about expectations. It's about that sneaking concern that maybe you're now being paid more than the person sitting next to you. So it's a confidence issue. It's a psychological issue. So what you see with lack of retention, with high turnover rates, is people who have not yet reached that level of limit of competence still underperforming. So people with plenty of competence, with plenty of ability, are underperforming because of the sort of imbalances in the motivational drivers.
Got it. Okay. Interesting.
All right. I think that maybe leads us into our next question, which I'll pass over to you, Marian. So, do you think talent retention is especially tricky or difficult in the digital infrastructure industry right now? So, I don't want to assume that the answer would be yes. So, I just want to ask that blanket question. And if so, what are the factors that are at play?
So yeah, I'm just reflecting a little bit here too. It is for sure it is very difficult to, given the circumstances that when you fast grow, it's always difficult when you fast grow because you don't have structure. You basically discover new grounds, so you haven't been there before. So and then everybody fish from the same pond. So it's like really people have a lot more choice, and every and more compensation, more better. Is really we've seen it with the software. Every 18 months or 12 months, people shift. So, however, to the point of what Mark mentioned, if you can create not just the financial aspect, intangible benefits that may not be monetary related, but really how by creating a great team and by creating a great culture where you look after for each other, and what, even though you're working under pressure, you might plan and say, what, I'm going to double down the engineer that I need to launch the data center because we know that during towards the end or the testing period is so stressful, we're going to double down on the resources. People notice that. People start to see that you just being there, you lead by example. You may be there yourself. If you sleep in the office or in the floor, people start to see that you're really there. So actually, it is really important to retain your talent, and really it could be detrimental if you don't, not only for the performance of your organization, but for the mental health, for really that's when people break down or quit, when they really felt it's just overwhelming or it's too much. So if you want to do big projects and do a lot in the industry, you got to be able to predict and be a few steps ahead of what are the likely issues we might face that we might lead us to lose critical talent. Because I can tell you, one leader, one talent could be so valuable that could be the difference between 10x or success or failure. It could be one leader away from exceptional performance. So that's why it's just so important to pay attention to those who do well and do everything you can to create such a condition for everybody to thrive, so they can be a champions for you and the organization. So there is many things that can lead to retention.
To ask,
Okay,
you mentioned, the extent to how hard it is, and I think it is hard right now, and I think that's for two reasons. I think Marian has explained that whole supply-demand imbalance and how challenging that is. But I think there is another factor, and I think that's the working environment that data centers are operating in, and it's becoming increasingly complex. And so you've got all sorts of new players in the market. You've got new stakeholders. You've got different types of investors coming in, demanding more ROI, quicker returns on their investment, more pressure to deliver faster and faster. And then you've got shifts in technology. You've got things like sort of ESG considerations. And so you've got a workforce that's operating under immense pressure. And so you've got this constant strain as well as a shortage of supply coming in. So I think it is hard, but I'm not sure it needs to be as hard as the industry is making it. And Marian and I had a little chat about this the other day. It was, actually, when you go back through history, there are so many examples of industries that have gone through this rapid expansion, these very complex ecosystems, this rethinking of who they are and what they're all about. So the data center industry has the opportunity to look at those and to learn from those. You saw what happened in finance after Big Bang, the deregulation of the financial markets. The same patterns were evident. You've seen it with tobacco and drinks companies who've reinvented themselves as luxury brands. And Marian, you had a couple of great examples the other day.
Yeah, well, look at what's happening now in the automotive industry. That shift from combustion engine to electric and autonomous vehicles. So the lighting industry, from bulbs to LED. I mean, that led to a major shift. Companies had to change overnight, and you're absolutely right. That actually doesn't have to be as difficult as it is right now. We can leverage and use best practices. We can take. I always have a philosophy: if you don't know something, don't learn from anyone. Learn from the expert who's done it, so that we could tap into those experts in those industries.
Yeah. Well, okay. So with that said, we've got the why, right? We understand a little bit the background, the environment, the backdrop, so to speak, of this. I know there's not one solution. I'm very aware there's not just one size fits all. There's no silver bullet here. Otherwise, it would be implemented. But is there like one thing that everyone should be doing that is very important, and that sort of is relevant to most workplaces? Is there one thing that you've seen work to increase talent retention rates? And Mark, I'll come to you for that.
Yes. Would it surprise you? I said mapping, measuring motivation.
I am shocked. Okay.
I really do believe that properly understanding human motivation in an organization is the best lens to start to fix these problems. And the research that we've done over many, many years now has shown that you've got to get into the real detail. You've got to understand imbalances in motivation, the extent to which people have, to Marian's early point around care, do people have a proper supportive environment around them that allows them to be the best version of themselves? How motivated are people individually to be the best version of themselves that they can possibly be? And how motivated are people collectively to do that in a team environment, in an organizational environment? And we found that by monitoring those dimensions, when you see imbalances in those, you can effectively predict 4 really key issues. One of those is turnover, staff turnover, attrition rates. One of those is serial underperformance. It's that issue I was talking about earlier, where you've got people who really haven't reached their limits, but are just not performing the way you think they should. Third one is error counts. People, simple errors that shouldn't get made. Why are these happening? And we can predict where those are likely to pop up. And then the fourth one, which is also linked into all of these, is critically burnout risk. So by really getting to grips with how people are or are not motivated across those dimensions, we can actually start to apply really precise interventions to the right people at the right time, because not everybody needs the same thing. Some people in an early stage growth industry, some people will be thriving on that. Some people get a real kick out of being stretched beyond their limits. Other people feel they're being stretched too far, and we need to understand which are which. So we've had a lot of good stories off the back of that with a couple of data center clients who've managed to really make a big change. One in particular that springs to mind is around women in the data center industry. Obviously there's an imbalance there, and we've seen one of our clients create a huge increase in motivational levels amongst their female employees.
And if I can add something that just because this is not only what helps to retain talent, but also to attract talent from externally. What they look for is who is the leader. Very often they really aspire of who I'm going to report to, and what do they really care about me and my vision, my goals. Who is the team members? Like, do I really connect? Is there good team dynamics? Is it scalable? They want to see. And what is the impact and purpose? So all of those are questions that people are constantly thinking, checking, and see and how they feel. Because if you don't really treat your people well, you not only will have a high attrition rate, but you'll not be able to attract top talent. Therefore, you are at absolute risk of never to grow at the rates of some of the companies that really truly care about making a profound impact. So there are a lot of details. And the other thing is to understand the career visions of each one of them. Do they match with the vision of the company? And what are the strengths analysis, the team strength analysis, the gaps that we have, so we can complement them in order to achieve the goal, and be very proactive about this.
Yeah, none of this seems obvious as you're saying. I would never have gotten there myself, but it seems like really important. It's very valid. So maybe I hope people come and find you guys, if it's on LinkedIn or wherever your socials are, to talk about that, because it is important, and it's the soft side of it. And Candice, I know, because I yap a lot. We're over time, but do we go to our lightning round, and how do we enforce this 15 seconds? I can police it.
I know.
I've got like scary Scottish accent. I can do it.
Perfect. All right, I'll let you run with it, Maxie.
Okay,
We only have a couple minutes left, so we are going to have to be brutal about sticking to this 15 seconds. But it's only 4 questions, so I'll
okay. Okay, fine. I'm going to time it. So we'll start with Marian. What's your top piece of career advice for high schoolers or college students? Go.
Curiosity. Just be very curious, and whatever you decide to do it as if this is your last chance. Like, you just always go with your absolute enthusiasm.
Totally agree. Okay, and what personality trait do you look most for in candidates?
Well, I look at several things. First of all, I look at their value and values. I look at their competence and what their strengths are, and I look at what sets their heart on fire. So what they motivate, because if there's no motivation, to Mark's point, it won't work. And I look at also what they like as a human being. Do they really care?
Understood. And then, if you had to master a new business skill, what would it be?
Oh, for me personally, being able to attract or hire, it's probably one of the most important. Hire well is one of the most important skills.
If you work it out, you're going to be rich. Okay, and then final one or two words. Describe the digital infrastructure industry. I'll give you 3 words. I'm in a good mood.
Exciting. I think it's really, really.
Okay. And you done it in 1. All right. Candice, would you like to take this over so that I don't scare people?
Yes. All right. So, Mark, same questions for you. So, what's your top piece of career advice?
That is, drink a lot of coffee or herbal tea. I don't mean get a caffeine addiction. I mean, go out and talk to as many people as you can. And my experience in the data center industry, I have hardly ever come across anyone that's going to say no to a student or a graduate coming saying, can I have 5 minutes of your time to learn about your industry?
Great.
Yeah.
We need them about as much as they need us, for sure. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then, Mark, what personality trait do you look for most in candidates?
A growth mindset, just the desire to want to learn, and the belief that we can learn. Growth mindset.
I love that. If you could instantly master a new business skill, what would it be?
For me, selling.
I don't know. I feel like you sound like you're pretty good at it. You would be.
I'm passionate about what I do, and I get talking about it. I can talk forever on my subject, but actually getting out there and selling it would be my.
And then in 1 to 2 words, how would you describe the digital infrastructure industry?
Okay, well, you started kind of talking about a television program, so I'm going to go back to a TV program from my childhood, showing my age, Tomorrow's World.
Oh, I love that. All right. Another one for me to check out. I haven't seen that. And obviously I'm about to wrap up Lost, so I need to.
So it was a sort of documentary program about new technology, new developments, and we were fascinated by it. So Tomorrow's World describes
Perfect.
what the data center industry is, I think.
Absolutely. All right, Simon, you know the drill now. So I think we're getting even faster as we go. So what is your top piece of career advice for high schoolers or college students?
Okay, very simple. Figure out what you're good at and get better at it.
Oh,
I like it.
And
Yeah.
what personality trait do you look for most in candidates?
Me, it's attentiveness, an ability to listen and process information.
Oh, that's a really good one that people don't usually say. I like that. And if you could instantly master a new business skill, what would it be?
Well, one skill that I have been able to master instantly almost is just assume good intentions. I think a lot of the stress is caused by people thinking, what the heck are they doing that for? If you just assume they're doing it with good intentions, you'll sleep a lot better at night.
I think it's called Occam's razor, something like that. Never assume evil when stupidity will do. Similar. I'm going to stop talking. Continue.
I love
Go
that.
on.
And Simon, I'm interested in your answer to this. Your 1 to 2 words to describe the digital infrastructure industry.
Okay, 2 words would be nice people. I think one thing we don't celebrate often enough is just what a nice community of people work in this industry. And if you had 3 words, it'd be very nice people.
All right. Perfect way to wrap it up. Thank you so much to all 3 of you for being here. Really appreciated this conversation. And it's such an important topic. And if to all of our audiences tuning in today, thank you. And be sure to check out jsa.net/JSATV for more podcast episodes and all sorts of great content there. And our YouTube channel is Jamie Scotto TV. And you can find Maxie and I and all 3 of these gentlemen on LinkedIn.
Yeah,
Thank you so
thanks to our panelists for sure. Sam and I always enjoy spending time with you. I think you're such a disciplined thinker, and Mark and Marian, it was really good to meet you. And then for everyone joining us this week, we hope to see you again next week. And then until then, have at it.